It's time for College Sports Weekly. How do you do, ladies and gentlemen? I'm Bill Hazen. The field of undefeated football teams is slowly thinning out week by week. One of the biggest surprises among the remaining undefeated teams is Baylor, which is now 8-0 following last week's victory over West Virginia. Coach Matt Rule says the West Virginia victory showcased his team's defensive prowess.
I want to say this first. I know even the feeling in the locker room is kind of like, hey, that was a tremendous defensive game. When you hold someone in modern college football to 64 yards in one half to 219 in the game, it's really hard to do. 83 of those coming on one play. Hold them to 7 points. I'm really proud of our defense. I thought it was a special day from them. Just breeds excellence, and just really proud of those guys. We have to improve, especially heading to TCU. But as I told the guys, don't apologize for going 8-0.
The Bears were 7-6 a year ago, and just 4-5 in the Big 12. And that's some of what's happening. Here's what's coming up on College Sports Weekly. We hop the train with the High Plains drifter of college football, Coach John Jenkins. And as the miles fly by, the coach reviews last week's big games and previews this weekend's outstanding matchups. Why is the NCAA considering changing its bylaws? Rex Lardner will tell you when we talk shop. Our multi-part interview with Commissioner Bobby Cox of the Indiana High School Athletic Association continues with more about press box design and deceptive football uniforms. And Gene DeLisio says football in the Dakotas is heating up as the temperatures fall on the small college beat. That's all ahead on College Sports Weekly.
Take a look under your bed. Find stuff under there? What about jobs? No? Now try your basement. There's a pair of overalls that overall you're not so into anymore. A perfectly good laptop that hasn't seen your lap in months. And even more stuff. But still no jobs? Well, you really have both. See, stuff is defined as household articles considered as a group. Sometimes this stuff is no longer needed. Wait, no longer needed? That can't be right. Because remember those jobs you were looking for? Those are really needed. And they're the stuff inside your stuff. Even inside that winter coat that moved with you to Phoenix. Our job is to unlock those jobs. And it starts when you donate your stuff to your local Goodwill. Here's how we do it. When you donate to Goodwill, we sell your stuff to provide job training for people right here in your community. So just by teaming up with Goodwill, you help create jobs. And isn't that worth parting with the leftover keytar from your 80s cover band? Goodwill. Donate stuff, create jobs. Find your nearest donation center at goodwill.org. A message from Goodwill and the Ad Council.
Music is a bridge between the material and the spiritual. My name is Harvey Lauer, and I'm 82. As a blind person, you have to be aware that nobody can tell you what you can or can't do. You really have to try things. My folks got me a little radio in 1940, and that was the best Christmas present I ever got. When I was 11 years old is when I started to play music, play the piano, and then the accordion, and then the cello. My wife, who was also blind, was a good cook. When she died, that's when I started Meals on Wheels. America, let's do lunch.
It's Meals on Wheels. 1 in 6 seniors faces the threat of hunger, and millions more live in isolation. Drop off a hot meal and say a quick hello. Volunteer for Meals on Wheels by donating your lunch break at americaletsdolunch.org. This message brought to you by Meals on Wheels America and the Ad Council.
You never know where we are going to chase down the High Plains drifter of college football, and right now we're checking in with John as he makes a train trip from very north to very south, and we have him alongside with us. We're hopping aboard on the train. I don't think he's in the hobo section, but I do know that he is getting ready.
Oh, boy, there you go, Bill. That's right. That's right. I'm back here in the freight with the cattle. That's it, buddy. Man, you're great. I tell you what, in coaching, you can easily go from the penthouse to the outhouse in 1 week, buddy. And currently, though, I will say this: I'm riding in luxury. I'm loading up one of my sports cars, taking it from Toronto on down to South Florida, and going to be in this sleepover train. And just gritting my teeth for some more football for this weekend. So let's let her rip and snort. What do you say?
Oh, absolutely, John. And as we get at it, we can use the penthouse to the outhouse as a theme right out of the gate with Oklahoma. And boy, they were riding high until Chris Kleiman and Kansas State got a hold of them.
Isn't that something? What a huge game for the Kansas State Wildcats. Hey, they led much of this game through 3 quarters by about 3 touchdowns. You know, they were injured. Kansas State's been hard to figure out. They started off the season, they had an impressive win over Mississippi State, and then they got some guys hurt. The top linebacker, one of the top pro prospects in the country, Cody Fletcher, he came back, and they got some other guys healthy, and boy, did they jump out there and play some great defense early. And then Oklahoma made a run at them late. Made the game a little closer, but the Kansas State Wildcats knocked off Oklahoma and sent them reeling into the loss column. People there at the Little Apple in Manhattan are awful excited now, aren't they?
The Little Apple, indeed. That's a great way to look at it. And I'll tell you, if you think that's all that went on with the Big 12, Texas stubbed their toe at TCU, John. The Big 12 is totally topsy-turvy here.
They all got knocked off, didn't they?
Yeah,
Texas, we talked about this. We talked about, hey, they're not there yet. There was a lot of talk, a lot of preseason hype about the Texas Longhorns being back. They're back. We heard that, and I'm starting to think, hey, back from where? You know what? They still have a long way to go.
Yeah.
And TCU, Gary Patterson's bunch, well-coached team. Boy, they showed them. You got some work to do still.
I think Notre Dame fans aren't very happy right now either. John, you know how badly Jim Harbaugh needed a real quality win, and brother, did they get one. And, John, it was decisive.
We mentioned last week, talking about coaches with the hot seats. Hey, man, his pants were on fire.
Yeah.
They had the Ann Arbor Volunteer Fire Department out there with hoses trying to save him, and they did that. They did that. I tell you what, his guys rallied. I mentioned this in our episode last week. Mm-hmm. We were talking, and I said, hey, nobody believes in you guys at Michigan. What you guys will have to do right now is get tightly bound with each other and ignore all the criticism and all the negativity from the outside. You've got to get tightly bound and pull together and fight your way out of this thing. And boy, did they ever do that with a sound victory over Notre Dame, who is a good football team.
Auburn and LSU, you said, John, last week was too tight to call, and it certainly turned out to be that game. LSU won it by 3, and this, of course, sets up a great matchup down the road for LSU with Alabama.
Yeah, Auburn did have the lead briefly, but Burrows, the quarterback, I tell you, he just continues to impress. I think people around the country are taking big note of him. We mentioned this early in the season, talking about him propelling himself into this Heisman race. I think he's the clear favorite right now, with certainly Hurts going down in defeat, and Tui getting injured over at Alabama. We got Jonathan Taylor, great running back at Wisconsin. Right now, the big talk around the country is Burrow at LSU and how things have really changed down there in Tigerland, down in Death Valley, because they've had solid performers. They have had great recruiting over the years, but they have never had a quarterback. Mettenberger, I liked him, but I don't think they used him properly as far as really opening up their passing game years ago. But they're doing that now with Burrow. He's a good one.
John, the days of Kansas being a rest stop in the Big 12 look like they are over. Ask Texas Tech all about that based on this last weekend.
Boy. Where's Cliff Kingsbury when we need him? I tell you what, the Kansas Jayhawks. I was at that game, as a matter of fact, last year, and Texas Tech rolled up a huge offensive onslaught against Kansas, and now the tables turned in just 1 year's time. Les Miles has come in there. Certainly the big win they had early in the season with Boston College. They put some belief, they put some confidence in those players, and they showed it again against Texas Tech. Gosh, what a tough weekend it was for the Big 12.
Oh, boy, I'll say a lot of topsy-turvy football going on in that league. Well, John, let's go ahead and hold it right there. We covered some of the big games certainly played in college football this week. Later, when we come back, we'll stay on the rails with you and preview the upcoming games this week. We'll get them direct from you, and you can talk with the ticket taker on that train and see if he has any ideas on some special games that he can advise you on, John. We'll check.
It.
Yeah, we'll check that out. We look for help, ladies and gentlemen, wherever we can get it, and that's I can count on John. He's a pretty resourceful guy. He's from Pampa, where they just had 9 inches of snow. Brother. Oh, well, we will be coming back, John. And next up, we're going to enjoy Rex Lardner. He's going to join us to talk shop. That's next on College Sports Weekly.
Founded in 1962, the National Collegiate Baseball Writers Association is dedicated to the advancement of college baseball. Membership includes writers, broadcasters, and publicists of the sport. NCBWA members serve as the voting body for the Dick Howser Trophy National Player of the Year. The organization has a website at ncbwa.com, or you can follow us on Twitter at ncbwa.
Time to talk shop once again. Rex Lardner, who is smiling from ear to ear. As our temperatures go down, Rex is feeling better about life all the time. Rex, longtime television sports executive at CBS, NBC, and Turner. Also a former associate commissioner at Conference USA. Rex now consults the broadcasting industry, professional sports, and college sports entities, and he comes to us via digital audio from Tucson, Arizona. Rex, a couple of weeks ago, we reported that the state of California had overwhelmingly passed legislation supporting the rights of college athletes to profit from their name, from their likeness, this kind of thing. This pitted the state directly against the NCAA and its amateur rules, which specifically forbid competing athletes from benefiting commercially. 12 other states hopped on board. They're looking at adopting the same legislation. Illinois is ready to do it. Right now, they would be the second state to do it. It appears the NCAA has seen the writing on the wall. Rex, they are taking a big step. They're going to retool their bylaws at all division levels, and some kind of solution is expected to be in place for the NCAA, reflecting this new mindset by 2021. Why did the NCAA move so surprisingly, so decisively and quickly?
Phil, I think there are two reasons for it. One is that California passed the legislation you just mentioned, and many other states are following suit. And probably if they're doing that, the majority of the other states will do the same thing. So I think that's one of the reasons. The other is, Bill, I think they didn't want to face lots of lawsuits and costs and referral fees and all of that kind of thing and keep it in court for 2 years. And I think it would have been damaging to the NCAA. And maybe they really felt, too, a third reason is that they, in the long run, they're not going to win anyway. But I just think it's that what the other states are doing and the idea of tying it up in lawsuits in court for a long time.
I'm sure there were some very serious discussions here because we both know, Rex, the NCAA can be very hard-headed. on stuff like this.
Absolutely.
Oh,
yeah.
boy, can they. And one reason why this announcement has really caught everybody by surprise is because of how this often plays out. Is it a situation where they just suddenly saw the light? Maybe one of their attorneys said, look, you're fighting a losing battle. Or was it the prospect of having to face as many as 13 states in court? Was that too much?
I think, Bill, a combination of things. I think you're right that lawyers and attorneys probably advised the NCAA and told them that this is something that's going to be in court for a long time and you're not going to win. And the fact that all of these other states are following California's lead, and I think there'll be more and more of them. But I think it was a combination that made them see the light.
I'll tell you how fast this thing is moving, Rex. You know, when California made their decision, there were some strong reactions right away, and one of those reactions came from the University of Wisconsin, their athletic director, Barry Alvarez, and he just came out and said, you know what, here at Wisconsin, we won't schedule any California schools due to that law. But then along comes Illinois. Governor J.B. Pritzker wants to do that same thing California did. And what's Alvarez going to do? Not play Illinois schools? I'm sure the Big Ten would take a more than a passing interest in that. Then the NCAA jumps in, and that's how fast this whole thing has happened. Your thoughts?
You know, Bill, the interesting thing to me is that the NCAA made the decision as quickly as they did. I really think this has been brewing within them for quite a while. And I think for the reasons we talked about, the court cases and the fact that they'll probably lose in court, I think that they made a decision decisively because they weren't going to win. And I think there's so much sentiment now against the NCAA that I think it may help their image in the long run. Can you imagine, though, if this was in place when Tim Tebow or someone like that was in college?
Oh.
I mean, he'd be a millionaire before he even graduated.
Yeah.
You know, things like that.
Yeah, no question. If that is true, and that scenario sounds likely to me, Rex, that really the NCAA has been looking at this, anticipating the problem, I'm a little surprised that the NCAA wouldn't come forward and say, well, you know, we are taking a close look at this. Nobody said anything.
No, they didn't, Bill. That's a great point you make because all of a sudden it happened. It's a startling revelation, and it just changes the whole process of marketing for the college student athletes.
Yeah. Here's a little change in process right here for you, Rex. This past weekend, Indiana broke through with a nice win at Nebraska, 38-31, and in the process, the Hoosiers got their 6th win, and of course that means a bowl bid. It's quite a success story for Coach Tom Allen, the one-time highly successful prep coach at Indianapolis Ben Davis High School. That's a Midwest football powerhouse. What does it mean to the Big Ten to have a successful football team in Bloomington?
Bill, I think it's a great achievement for Coach Allen, his staff, and the players. You know, they're not known as a football powerhouse. My sense is that the culture is changing, and it really helps the Big Ten because Indiana was a doormat in football for many, many years, and they had some success. But I think Allen is retooling the entire organization, and I think they're going to be successful for years to come.
You know, it's interesting because I do a lot of Indiana high school football. Among the various things that I do, I see a lot of it. And I can tell you one thing, one of the big stories about football in the state of Indiana, over my lifetime, it's gotten a lot better. There are a lot of good football players in the state.
They really are, Bill. And I think in the past, Indiana has not been able to recruit the 4- and 5-star athletes. They would go to Ohio State or Michigan or another school, and Indiana had this reputation of being a doormat in the Big Ten, so they just were not recruiting well. I think Tom Allen has changed that, and they're getting the better kids now.
Boy, and IU has spent a great deal of money on football facilities in recent years, Rex. You know, Memorial Stadium was always very nice. I always loved watching games there, but now we wouldn't even recognize it today. That beautiful football center they have integrated right into the stadium. It's gorgeous. The John Mellencamp Pavilion, that's their indoor practice facility, and that's one of the better ones around. Is IU for real?
I believe they are, Bill. I think the combination of Allen's changing the culture, a better recruiting, having almost state-of-the-art facilities in football leads a recruit to say, God, maybe Indiana is a good place to go. Other places have great facilities and everything else too. Mm-hmm. And besides playing time, that's what we've discussed, that the student athlete really likes to have the facilities. But Bill, I think they're for real. I think they're going to be successful for the next few years.
The last coach who really had success at IU was the late Bill Mallory, who had coached at Northern Illinois, coached at Colorado. He was twice named Big Ten Coach of the Year in back-to-back years, no less. It's been hard for IU to stay up there in football. Why?
Well, I think part of it is recruiting within the state. They just were not getting the bona fide athletes. They were going to neighboring schools which had much better reputations. And because Indiana has always been a second-tier school in the Big Ten, I think a lot of great athletes don't look at them that seriously. And I think they are now with what Allen has done. And he's got a great staff, and he's got a lot of young freshmen and sophomores. So my feeling is that they're going to sustain football culture and continue to be successful.
Rex, we are about a month away from celebrating the 100th anniversary of the founding of RCA, the Radio Corporation of America, and through extension of NBC, a former employee of yours. NBC would grow out of this originally with two radio networks, the Red Network and the Blue Network. Today, we know the Blue Network as ABC. Blogger Dick Taylor wrote an interesting entry on where radio is 100 years down the road from the founding of RCA. The question he asked regarded the relevance of the traditional radio medium. Can radio retain its relevance as we move to smartphones? And how does radio go about doing that?
Bill, I think there'll always be a place for radio, and sports has a lot to do with it, live sports on radio. But my sense is that the technology is such, and you mentioned the smartphones, more and more people are getting their information and getting radio from smartphones. And I think that's the trend of the future. There'll always be a place, I think, for AM and FM radio. Certainly, as people drive all the time, they're going to listen to the radio, whether it be music or news or sports. And there's something to be said for that. But I think with the technology, more and more people will be using smartphones.
And we're seeing smartphones adapted directly into cars, too. I'm kind of old school about this. To me, it's about the content. In today's environment, with budgets stretched to the limit, how does a station excel in what they program on the air?
Bill, I think a lot of it has to do with live events, whether it be news or sports, and maybe sometimes weather. But I think one way of doing it is to do more and more live events. There's nothing taped and there's nothing filmed. It's live. And I think, like we've talked before, many of the all-sports stations only do well with live events. I mean, ESPN, for example, we've talked about that. Mm-hmm. A lot of their tape programming, a lot of their talking heads do not do well. It's really the live events of some magnitude. And I think that's the way they can continue to sell.
Interesting, and certainly right in your wheelhouse, Rex, because that was your specialty for many, many years. So, well, a lot of fun. Great visit as always, Rex. We'll see you next week.
Sounds great, Bill. Certainly enjoyed it.
And I enjoyed it too, Rex. Work on that backhand now. It's that time of year. Rex, I will. Yeah, Rex Lardner. We talk shop, and we will be back with more of College Sports Weekly.
I love being a part of Action Team.
For more than a decade, Major League Baseball players and action teams of high school students have been working together to train and inspire the next generation of volunteers.
It's one of the best feelings in the world.
Just that simple act is transforming someone else's life.
All-star Giancarlo Stanton and Chris Capuano join Action Team captains to make a difference in their communities.
It'll just make you feel so good about yourself.
I'd do anything to convince you just to be a part of this.
For more information, go to actionteam.org.
In the past few weeks, you've had an opportunity to hear from the commissioner of the Indiana High School Athletic Association, Bobby Cox. In our last part of this multi-part interview, we spoke about some of the challenges of press box design and how elevator access and the American Disabilities Act factors in. Let's pick it up from there. What is the long-term solution for something like this? Because as you point out, you're looking at regular maintenance. Say, for example, you install elevators. That means probably your insurance cost will go up somewhat. You have regular maintenance and things like that, in addition to the cost of the elevators themselves. So there is an expense there, and that is very legit. And some schools are squeezed pretty hard and just don't have, as you've pointed out, the funds in which to do it. In the long term, how does something like this get resolved, if it can be resolved?
Well, I think it all revolves around school funding and how we're providing funds from the state to our schools with respect to capital projects funds, general funds, things of that nature, where schools can continue to expand. Many communities in our state, they reach out to their communities for referendum votes to add to the tax base, add dollars to the school funding formulas, and take on special projects. And while that concept has slowed here in the last 3 to 5 years, there was a significant building wave that went on in the early 2010s and up through about 2015, where we saw a lot of school construction, a lot of school renovation, new schools, and I can think of several off the top of my head in the state of Indiana that built just magnificent campuses. They have wonderful facilities. That's slowed down a bit. So I think it's just a rethinking of the entire school funding formula and what we do of the funds that we allocate to schools to build facilities, to renovate facilities. You don't always have to build a brand new one. We've got a lot of great gymnasiums and great football stadiums and other athletic venues at our member schools that simply just need an upgrade and a renewal. And then when we do that, obviously we need to make sure that they are at code for the newest standards. And so we just need to make a critical evaluation of where our facilities are and what we can do with them. And those schools make those determinations, and we try to support them in ways that we can. Lighting, for example, we have a lighting standards book that we provide our member schools. So when they're redoing their soccer stadium and they want to light it, here's the standard for lighting for soccer. Football, same thing. Encouraging folks to use LED lighting, which is brighter, more eco-friendly, usually less expensive, more expensive to install, but over time, less expensive to operate. So we do that for our membership as well, and when they reach out to us, we provide whatever data we can.
Yeah, interesting. In recent years, I've seen a number of football uniforms, Commissioner, that, well, trying to think of a good way to put this, it really stretches the boundaries of clear visibility. Maybe that's the best way to put it. You know this. Something that's important for the fans, it's important for game officials, statisticians, broadcasters. These uniforms seem to fall into two types. There's a uniform that doesn't have high contrast numbers and piping, and then there's the type where the colors blend more as sweat accumulates on the uniform, so it changes during the game. Coaches, as you know, are looking for any edge that they can get, and there is a temptation there for any coach to make player identification as difficult as possible for the opposing team. How do you handle this, and what's being done to assure that everyone can recognize the players on the field?
Well, I think it's a big problem, Bill. I've been to games, and I stand on the sidelines a lot, and I'm on the field, and I can't recognize the numbers. Now, I know my vision's getting bad, but it's not that bad yet. And then if I'm up in the press box for a contest, it sometimes is very difficult. Let me tell you how this really works. Every one of the 18 of our sports, the National Federation of State High School Associations, they write the rules for those sports. Football is one of those sports. So there's an NFHS Football Rules Committee. In the NFHS Football Rules Committee, every state that uses the NFHS football rules, that's 50 state associations. Texas is the only one that doesn't. and they write the rules for football. Contained within those rules are specific criterion speaking to the uniform. And what has occurred is there has been, in my opinion, and I can say this, I was on the Football Rules Committee for 11 years, so I kind of know how that whole thing works. We've kind of gravitated away from an attention to uniform, and then what occurs here are manufacturers that manufacture football uniforms. All of them are looking for an edge over their competitor in order to sell a uniform. And so if they can design something that's a little edgier than the guy next door, that's something that schools will buy, something that kids will like, then you'll see that uniform appear. And if it doesn't violate NFHS rules, then that uniform will be out there. I think right now that with respect to the football rules book at high school level, that language needs to be specified and refined to designate that the number must be a contrasting color to the body of the jersey. And you can't have a number that's just simply outlined with a contrasting color. Mm-hmm. I've seen uniforms that are gray, for example, with a contrasting gold piping and a gray number. Well, if you're an old guy like me and you're sitting 40 yards from the field, you can't tell number 11 from number 21 from anybody.
Yeah.
And so that becomes difficult for broadcasters. It's difficult for scouting purposes. So I think we've got to turn our attention back to uniforms a little bit with respect to numbering, particularly in football. Now, basketball, you're in a closed confine. It's not as bad. I've seen some uniforms that are a little tough to read, but they're not as bad. In a little closer confine, it's easier to determine who you're really looking at. But in football, the number of players that are on the field, those uniforms that are hard to see, you might have some lighting issues that night. It might be raining that night. There's a variety of challenges that could be out there. It gets tough. And so I think it's something that the Football Rules Committee needs to revisit, and we would certainly encourage that conversation.
Boy, and I can tell you that would be very much appreciated by broadcasters and fans alike. Commissioner, I'd like to invite you back to conclude this interview next week. Bobby Cox, the commissioner of the Indiana High School Athletic Association, will be back with more of College Sports Weekly.
He wanted to be known for doing his best.
Sure, right.
His best made him Major League Baseball's most valuable player.
Strike two.
He played in 6 World Series and was elected to the Hall of Fame. Although an honest man, he was best at stealing home. But the best quality of Jackie Robinson's life was his character. So here's to you, Mr. Robinson. Thanks for passing it on. From the Foundation for a Better Life at Values.com.
Now it's time to check out the small college beat. Gene DeLisio reporting on a long football win streak. Gene?
Bill, more good football played in the Dakotas this week. Number 1 ranked North Dakota State beat number 3 South Dakota State 23-16. Adam Cofield's 71-yard touchdown run with 2:32 to play was the difference. The Bison now have the 29-game win streak. Also in the FCS rankings, James Madison number 2, Weber State now ranked number 3 in the nation, and North Dakota moves back into the top 25 this week as coach Bubba Schweigert's Hawks beat 9th-ranked Montana State 16-12.
We got off to a decent start. We were leading the game 7-3, and then unfortunately a turnover, which you never want, and then do not convert the 4th and short, so it really gave them a lot of momentum, but we're able to go into halftime up 7-6, and then once again, they kept running the football, and popped a couple on us, and that got them a lead that really the special teams made the difference down the stretch. We were able to pin them, got the block punt, and let's not forget about our kicker made a heck of a play on the kick, the last one, to force a touchback, and then defense held. So pleased with the win, and now we got to move on.
North Dakota football coach Bubba Schweigert. In the Division II rankings this week, Valdosta State remains number 1. Ferris State second. Minnesota State is third. Grand Valley State ranks number 15. Grand Valley played Davenport in a steady rain in Grand Rapids on Saturday and won that game 27-7 for coach Matt Mitchell.
That's the first time all season we haven't turned the ball over. Picked the downpour for 3 hours to be our first time we didn't turn the ball over, but we tried to stay aggressive throwing the ball. It was just kind of got difficult, and I was glad that we found a way to score points in the second half on that one drive. Defensively, really proud of our defensive effort. Just kind of kept shutting them out. We had a bad check on their one touchdown pass. Obviously, the guy was wide open, so we got to get that corrected. And I thought our special teams played really well too. Blocked the punt, set up some field position with different things we did. So. Every inch was valuable out there tonight with not the ability to get very many explosive plays. So found a way to get enough offensively and obviously limit them 7 defensively and did a good job.
Grand Valley football coach Matt Mitchell. Assistant Ian Falconer will take over as head coach at Pacific University next season, replacing Keith Buckley, who moves up to athletic director. Falconer has also assisted at Lewis and Clark and Oberlin and has been part of the Pacific program since the Boxers reinstated football in 2010. The athletic landscape at St. Thomas of Minnesota is certainly changing. Last spring, the school was told it was no longer wanted in the Division III Minnesota Intercollegiate Athletic Conference. And now the Tommies are trying to make the jump all the way to Division I and join the Summit League. St. Thomas football coach Glenn Caruso is very happy that athletic director Phil Eston is handling these issues.
Well, Phil Eston is, he's a blessing to me personally. I think he's an absolute blessing to the school for us to have someone who has his leadership and vision and abilities to go through a tough time. Anyone can go through simple times, right? The easy times, that's nothing. But for us to have Phil lead us and guide us is pretty awesome. But Phil's been very open and honest with everything, which is one of the reasons why we're very fortunate to have him. I think it speaks to maybe the St. Thomas overall brand that a team that's afflicted in this manner actually has opportunities.
St. Thomas football coach Glenn Caruso speaking with One Question podcast. The NAIA football rankings for this week: Morningside of Iowa ranked number 1, Marion of Indiana is second, and Kansas Wesleyan is ranked third. The Coyotes struggled on Saturday, but held off Avila 48-47 as Johnny Fiato threw 5 touchdown passes, and Stevie Williams caught 6 passes for 206 yards and 3 scores. Kansas Wesleyan is now 8-0 under first-year head coach Myers Hendrickson, who has transitioned into that head coaching role very well.
Yeah, I think it starts with our leaders, offensively and defensively, special teams. We return people in all phases of the game. Now, what we looked at in the spring is we tried to develop depth, and that's one place where we felt like we're at as a program, is that, we've got leaders, and then we've got guys that can be developed into key critical positions going into 2019, and that's what we got to do, and that's that buy-in that you're talking about, and we were able to get that done in the spring and just keep building on that going into the fall.
Kansas Wesleyan football coach Myers Hendrickson. Madai is filling its men's basketball coaching vacancy by hiring Ursinus assistant Keith Hack. Hack replaces Mike Blaine, who's leaving Madai for the head coaching position at Plattsburgh State. There should be some great basketball in the NAIA Chicagoland Collegiate Conference, where St. Ambrose coach Ray Shovlin expects to compete for the title.
We returned virtually everybody from last year's team, so we really, even though they might be younger, they're pretty experienced. So we really have high expectations like normal. We really feel we can play 9, 10, 11 guys, and I think that's always important in a college basketball season. It's a long season. So you're really having to count on not only 1 or 2 players, but 9 or 10 usually. But we feel very good. Guys have worked hard and I think are doing a great job.
St. Ambrose men's basketball coach Ray Shovlin. That's Small College Sports News. I'm Gene DeLisio reporting.
Thanks, Gene. We'll check in once again next week. Now, when we return, we'll hop back on that train with John Jenkins next on College Sports Weekly.
Okay, Jimmy, we just need to pick up some light bulbs.
Which ones are we supposed to buy, Grandpa?
Well, we can save money by using an energy-saving incandescent CFL or LED.
How about this bulb?
We need to replace a 60-watt bulb. That one is 800 lumens, so it should do the trick.
Lumens?
Lumens tell us how bright the light is. The more lumens, the brighter the bulb.
You know, Grandpa, you're pretty bright yourself.
Lumens, the new way to shop for light. Learn more at energysavers.gov.
Earlier in the program, we hopped on the train with Coach John Jenkins. He is headed south from way up north. We caught up with him, and he's still back there in the hobo section, but he's getting advice from everybody on the top games this weekend. We go to no expense to try to get the greatest expertise we can get on the stuff you're going to hear. And John's back with us once again. Actually, he's in the lap of luxury, to be quite honest with you. Which, John, this is where John always is. And, that's the big neighborhood style. We all know that. And, John, we are going to see a very interesting football game. We're going to go through the games this week that we think could be pretty special. Of course, a traditional favorite, Georgia and Florida, and of course, as usual, they'll play that one in Jacksonville.
They always call it the largest cocktail party in the world. When Georgia, they're in Jacksonville, Florida, when they get together and play each other. And I tell you what, it's going to be a great one. Once again, I bet you Dan Mullen is chomping at the bits to turn the tables on the Georgia Bulldogs if he can keep his Florida Gators playing well. Boy, he's done a great job the 2 years that he's been back. And certainly Georgia still may be stinging, and from that South Carolina loss from over a week ago, they may still be feeling sorry for themselves. But if Florida's going to have any sympathy for them, boy, they better think again.
Yeah, you can forget that, definitely. I think both of these teams are going to be pretty hungry. Well, we know what Florida's going to be doing. Florida State will be playing Miami. That is a huge in-state rivalry.
Yeah, it's always been that way. Certainly in past years, maybe a lot greater than it is right now. There's a lot of bling is off of this game. Florida State is really having a tough year, tough season. Miami, on the other hand, they're trying to rebuild and come back. Mm-hmm. So you got two mystery programs right here. No telling how this thing's going to turn out. I tell you what, I'm going to give my nod to the Miami Hurricanes on this one. I just really believe that Florida State program is in trouble, and I think Miami, on the other hand, they've been up and down all through the season. They've got a ways to go naturally as far as rebuilding that program, but I'm going to give my tip of the hat to Miami in this one.
John, here are two teams that literally have fought their way onto our list of games this week, John, due to outstanding victories. Normally, we wouldn't pay much attention to these two. Kansas State, fresh off a victory over Oklahoma. Kansas, fresh off a victory over Texas Tech, and Memorial Stadium in Lawrence will be the host for this ball game.
Yeah, you know what? Isn't this something? Isn't this something? You're right. We would never mention a matchup like this. And, well, we've got rivalries. We got big rivalries around the country. And we could talk about these until the world goes level. But this one particularly, we wouldn't mention this one. But, hey, they both come off of big, huge wins. Certainly Kansas State beating Oklahoma like they did, and they're getting healthy. Certainly the real fine pro prospect linebacker Cody Fletcher, he's back and ripping and snorting for Kansas State. Les Miles has got his guys really believing in themselves. They beat Texas Tech. Oh, gosh, that hadn't happened in a while. And so right there in Lawrence, Kansas, you got alumni, you got followers and fans from both sides feeling good. They're going to show up, and, boy, they're going to be excited about this one, aren't they?
Yeah. Two games of interest, John, in the American Athletic Conference. Undefeated SMU at Memphis, which has only the one loss. And then at the same time, everybody's kind of ignoring Cincinnati, but they are right there, and they are playing at East Carolina. So those are two showcase teams in the league right there.
Yeah, that league is interesting and surprising. Memphis got barely edged out a few weeks ago against Temple, 30-28, I believe. So, we've got two programs here that could easily be undefeated playing each other this late in the year. Sonny Dykes, we've talked about him all through the season. Undefeated, sitting there, undefeated, Bill. My gosh, I tell you what, are they excited that they're coming into Memphis. It's not going to be an easy game. My old buddy Fred Smith, the business icon of FedEx, big follower of the Memphis Tigers, he's excited to follow this game. I talked to him about that one coming up, and naturally, I really will say this. Watching SMU beat Houston there when I was live here last week with you there at the game on Thursday night.
Oh, yeah.
Hey, Buechele, the quarterback from SMU, he is the success behind this team this year. The transfer from Texas, he's a senior. He does not make foolish mistakes. He is not going to throw the ball up for grabs or have a lot of turnovers. That is the key to the SMU Ponies riding along smooth, undefeated this season. What a fine job Buechele has done. Now, he's going to have it to do against a tough Memphis defense right there in the Mid-South. Those boys coming down off of Beale Street, all the blues music. They're going to have to contend with that. I tell you what, SMU will. But if they can do it, then once again, Sonny Dykes can look forward to that big, huge payoff that I'm going to give him on that Baskin-Robbins ice cream at the end of the season.
Oh, yeah, the Liberty Bowl will be rocking on that one, John. There's no doubt.
Oh, yeah.
Hey, if Nikita looks a little nervous to you, John, these days, they got UAB coming into Tennessee this week, and, John, they've already stubbed their toe once on a pay game.
Oh, you know what? Isn't that something? They're starting to get back and get a blood transfusion, I think, because they beat a rebuilding Mississippi State team a couple weeks ago. But you know what? We've got a team here, Alabama at Birmingham, who is not going to be highly regarded. They're coming in there to take their paycheck. But you know what? They could leave with a big victory, too. This is a good program. Boy, I've got a lot of respect for that coaching staff there.
Yeah. Over
the last few years, what they've been able to accomplish. I'm going to have a lot of interest in this game, Bill. I know you will too.
Yes, I will. I'm a great admirer of Bill Clark, as you are, and he's done an outstanding job. I know you're going to be getting off of the train very soon so that you can get on another train which will take you to Kelly Shorts Stadium at Central Michigan University to see the Chippewas, known as the Chips, take on the Northern Illinois Huskies, who are starting to pile up some W's here.
Yeah, boy. Now, why am I not surprised that Northern Illinois is on the road? Isn't that typical? College football games, we all were surprised every weekend, aren't we? We talked about Michigan bouncing back against Notre Dame, and there's going to be some more upsets this weekend. There's going to be some more outstanding games. Just like you said, certainly Kansas State and Kansas.
Yep.
Who would have ever thought there would be great interest in this one right here at the start of the season with both programs?
And think about this one, John. If Illinois beats Rutgers this Saturday, they are one win away from a bowl game.
Isn't that amazing? Hey, Lovie Smith, he has gone from who's he to who's who. He's a who's who candidate once again. You got to hand it to these guys. I mean, after being beaten by Eastern Michigan, we're just talking about a program at Illinois that couldn't get any lower. Well, they have bounced back. They have rebounded. Certainly the win over Wisconsin, and now putting themselves in position where they can sniff out a bowl opportunity here soon. They do see some light at the end of the tunnel, don't they?
Boy, I'll say the light you want to see coming out of the tunnel is not that train you're on, by the way, coming out. So you're right about that.
It's not an oncoming train.
Yeah, that's exactly right, especially the one you're on. You don't want to see that. Well, John, it's a pleasure. Say hello to the ticket taker when he drops by to punch your ticket there, John.
That's it, buddy. I tell you what, Bill, enjoy the games this weekend, Hoss. And I'll be back in touch with you again next week.
John, always a pleasure. Travel safely. John Jenkins, our guest, the High Plains drifter of college football. He's carrying a snow shovel just in case he needs it. If that train goes to Pampa, he's ready to go ahead and dig out. And we will be back with more of College Sports Weekly. Time to head for home. The push remains for major college football teams to upgrade the quality of their schedules. But does it actually work? The story next week. And now let's introduce our team. The executive producer is Keith Haney. Coordinating producer Bo Carter. Small college editor Gene DeLisio. And a special thanks to sports information officers throughout the country for their contributions to this program. Now, this is Bill Hazen saying thanks for being with us. Be sure to tell your friends about us. And we'll see you next week on College Sports Weekly.